Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today I am doing a pretty late February wrap up, but the end of February and beginning of March was very busy for me and my family. We had a big theater production, so Juliet starred as Alice in Alice in Wonderland, which was super exciting, but it meant a lot of last minute things like tech rehearsal, dress rehearsal, getting everything ready. And then Isaac and Andrew did a fundraiser for their swim team called Swim for Hope, which is a fundraiser for the Cancer Society. So that was also a big all-day thing and took a lot of preparation and volunteer hours. And so here is my February wrap up at the end of the first week of March. I think I'll probably stick my March TBR at the end of this video as well, because I only read 7 books in February, and so it probably won't take too long to go through them, but I will go through. We'll see how we're doing for time, how much I talk, and then if I have time, I'll just add the March TBR in at the end of the video. So as I said, I read 7 books in the month of February, and 4 of those were actually on audio. It was a pretty busy month and a short month. We had, on top of the things I just mentioned, we had a couple of swim meets that we had to drive out of town for. Work was really busy, and so it was an audio heavy month, but I was happy with everything that I read, and I really enjoyed the things that I read. And so we'll just go through them. I have my reading journal here in front of me, and I'll just pop a little picture up. But the very first book that I read in February was Everything is Tuberculosis, which is a work of nonfiction by John Green. And I really enjoyed John Green's nonfiction. If you watched my top 10 survey of the last 6 years, his other work of nonfiction was on that list. And I don't think that Everything is Tuberculosis will become an all-time favorite, because it is more of a niche topic versus kind of the broad and sweeping scope of the Anthropocene reviewed. But it was very enjoyable. It's kind of hard to come into this book and rate it based on how I think other people will interpret it, because just by nature of having gone through med school, a lot of the information in this book I already knew, because a lot of it is a basic overview of tuberculosis and how it is still active, and who it affects and how it affects them. How do you treat it? What are the barriers to entry? And we covered tuberculosis in both my infectious disease courses and our global kind of public health lectures in medical school. So it was a common-ish topic. It's not, I am not a tuberculosis expert. However, this book is an overview and kind of an introduction to what tuberculosis is and how it has affected people. And so someone who has both gone to med school and read some poetry and has a passing knowledge of kind of Victorian authors, a lot of what John Green gets into about the romanticizing tuberculosis, a lot of what he talks about in interpreting it as this malady of artists and how artistic people die young, and how our public perception of tuberculosis shaped how it was treated and how it was approached as an illness. A lot of that was something that I had a general passing knowledge of, but it was still very fascinating. And if you don't know much about tuberculosis, or if you think that it is kind of this Victorian illness that affected people hundreds of years ago and is not really relevant in today's world, you should absolutely pick this up. I listened to the audiobook. I thought it was fantastic. It's very moving. John Green has a great way of integrating his research with a personal touch. There's almost always a layer of stories about people that he knows, people he's come in contact with in both his fiction and his nonfiction, really. But he did a great job of integrating kind of a personal story along with the history of tuberculosis here. And it was very well done. I think I gave this 4 stars. I'll just double check. Yes. I gave this book 4 stars, had a great time listening to it, and would definitely highly recommend it if this is a topic that you are at all interested in. Like I said, I'm not able to fully gauge how this will read to someone who doesn't have this knowledge. Like, maybe it'll be amazing 5-star read, maybe it won't be interesting at all, but I enjoyed it. Even though a lot of the scientific part of the book was review, I thought that it was still very well done and had a great time reading it. And then after that, so the next book that I read was actually my favorite book of the month, and this was my 5-star read for February. And that book is The River Has Roots by Amal El-Mahtar, I think is the Amal El-Mahtar, is one of the duo of writers who wrote This Is How We Lose the Time War, which kind of exploded a couple of years ago in popularity. And it is beautiful. If you have read that novella, then I think you'll find some similarities in the unique approach and writing style in this one, but it is definitely something uniquely its own. And to me, it was like this gorgeous, perfect little novella. I had such a good time reading it. I'm not going to really say what it's about, except to say that it is a fantasy novella, and it is fairy tale-esque. So it feels like something that was written hundreds of years ago and is being retold from this modern lens, but that is not the case. I think that Elmotar is just an imaginative writer, has a very unique lens through which they examine fantasy, and the way that they write is gorgeous. I thought that this book was so good. I listened to this one by audio as well, and the audiobook was also excellent. I think I got nominated for a couple of audiobook awards last year. The narrator sings the singing parts of the book, and it is a very poetic novella. Poetry, language, grammar, the construction of words, the meaning of words, how words tie to emotion, and how what you intend by what you say reflects on what happens. It all kind of mixes together to create this very fluid magic, and I cannot recommend this highly enough. I thought that it was beautiful. Like I said, I listened to this one by audio, but I will pick up a paper copy because I would love to have a copy of this book, and I would love to read it because I want to know how different it feels to read this versus listen to it, and I would happily read it over and over again. It was short, but very poignant. It was lyrical. It was everything that I want from a low fantasy novel. I just think that it's beautiful. If you like fairy tales, if you like poetry, if you enjoy music, if you enjoy the place where all of those come together to create something, then I think that you would really like this book as well. And as I said, it is my book of the month. It is my favorite thing that I read in February, and I might read it again before the end of the year. I don't know. I just think because it's so odd and dreamy that it might take a couple of readings to even get everything out of it. And because it's so short, it doesn't take a huge investment of time. So there's a possibility that I may even read this one again before the year is out. Then my third book of the month was another work of nonfiction. So this is a big nonfiction month for me. I had 2 nonfiction reads, and that one was one that I spoke about in my February TBR. This one was from the library, and it's called Mother Mary Comes to Me, and that was by Arundhati Roy, and that it is a memoir and exploration of her relationship with her mother. And what this reminded me of is a book that everybody was reading a couple of years ago, and I forget the exact title, but I think I'm Glad My Mom Died, the Jeanette McCurdy book, where she wrote about her upbringing, her relationship with her mother, what it was like to grow up as a child star. Now, Arundhati Roy is not a child Hollywood star, but she is an acclaimed author who had an atypical upbringing compared to what the viewership of this channel would relate to, because most of the people who view this channel are from North America or from Europe. Obviously, there are some writers who come from other parts of the world. Arundhati Roy grew up in India, and this is very much an exploration of her childhood, about the world that she grew up in, how that world shaped her mother and the kind of mother that she was, how it shaped her and her brother, their relationship with each other, their relationship with their mother. And it is beautiful. I think if Jeanette McCurdy's book is kind of the irreverent pop version of this type of story, then Mother Mary Comes to Me is very much the literary equivalent. And I'm not saying that to impose any kind of like moral judgment or value judgment on which is better or worse. But if you liked the idea of Jeanette McCurdy's book, but you feel that you lean toward a more kind of poetic or literary style, but you want to explore those same themes, you're interested in that portrait of a family and a mother-daughter relationship, then I would absolutely recommend this. It taught me a lot about just kind of the history, the politics, the political movements of the time. Arundhati Roy was also very enmeshed in kind of the political changes in India. She has a very interesting life, many things that I did not know, and this absolutely made me want to read everything that she has ever written. I haven't read anything by her before, so this was my first book by her, and I'm very intrigued I'd obviously heard about her work before, but I hadn't read any of it myself, and so I'm very intrigued to check it out, and I I'm very much looking forward to that. So I think a couple more of her works might end up on my TBR before the year is over. But I was very happy that I picked this one up from the library and had a great time reading it. The next one, this was a book that was recommended by Juliet, actually. So this was a book that I read at Juliet's request because she is in the midst of reading this series right now. And so this was book 1 of the Wings of Fire series. So this, for anybody who has a child, for anyone who's kind of tuned into the middle grade fantasy world, Wings of Fire is like the big series in the middle grade world. And right now, I think actually just this past week, book 16, I'm going to say, of Wings of Fire was just released. So there's been a lot of Wings of Fire hype in our house right now. But this is a middle grade series, you know, a long spanning series that follows a group of dragons. And so the first book is called The Dragonet Prophecy, and it is about a prophecy that revolves around 5 young dragons. And so the dragon world is in turmoil. There is kind of this constant state of war. There are different factions between the different types of dragons. And there's a prophecy that there are going to be 5 dragonettes who will rise up and put an end to this war. They will select a queen. They will ensure that someone stable is on the throne, and all of these decades of war can come to an end. And so we follow these 5 dragonettes as they grow up. And it's actually at the point where we begin the story, they are just starting to kind of chafe against the restrictive life they have. They've been rescued, we'll call it, and raised by a group of essentially like freedom fighters who believe that they are the Dragonettes of Prophecy and have not allowed them any contact with the outside world. They want them to be impartial. They want to raise them to be strong and smart and powerful so that they can then go out and fulfill their destiny. And so this book is about the Dragonettes kind of pushing back against that, deciding that they want to have a say in their life, that they should be able to go out and experience the world, to see the families that they were stolen from and kind of decide for themselves what they want to do. And the interesting thing about this is that in this dragon world, the dragons are very much vicious. And as I said, they're kind of broken up into factions by the specific race of dragon. And there's not a lot of empathy or friendship between dragons. It's a very cutthroat species. And so raising these 5 dragonettes together in close proximity has created a bond between them that's not really seen anywhere else in the dragon world. And so it's kind of set them up to be something apart from the rest of dragonkind. And this was surprisingly, I guess not surprisingly, because I am a big fan of middle grade, but I thought this was going to be, there's the kind of middle grade I have found that I have liked in the past has been middle grade that has a more restricted lens and kind of a specific purpose. Usually individual books or short series that have been written with specific themes in mind. I haven't read a lot of these kind of long, sprawling middle grade series that are more for the fun of it. And I was personally surprised by how much I liked this. It was really fun to talk about it with Juliet. She has very strong opinions about like which dragons are the best, which type of dragon is the best, what should happen. It was also very interesting to read something that she has already read because I'm not used to being on that side, and she's not the best. She doesn't have the best poker face. So she sometimes would be like, are you at, what chapter are you at? What's happening? And like, so I could kind of tell that something was something was supposed to happen soon, but it was very fun to read and I had a great time with it. I will not go through it in this recap, but I have actually also already read book 2. So if I go through my TBR, book 2 won't be on there because I've already read that as well. But that was really good. I did this one on audio. I didn't love the audio narration, but Juliet had already had the audiobook. She has been listening to them on audio and she really likes the narrator. I thought that it was a little bit flat, and I think if I continue on, I will try to get the physical copies from the library, but she enjoys the audio. Wasn't my favorite audiobook. I lied. So I thought that I didn't finish book 2 in February, but I actually did. So I did read book 2, The Lost Heir. So this was book 2 of the Wings of Fire series. And I'm not really going to go through what happens in this one because it is a series and, you know, even the setup for this one is kind of spoilers for the first one. But I will say I read book 2 as well. It seems like we're going to kind of focus on a different one of each of the dragonettes in each of the first 5 books. So this was about a different dragonette narrated by a different dragonette. And I really liked it. It was really fun. I think I've preferred book 1, but I think I gave them both 4 stars. I did. Yeah. So I gave both of them 4 stars. really enjoyed them, having a great time talking about them with Juliet. Book 6 of the month was a volume of Yona of the Dawn. So this is Yona of the Dawn volume 7. This is a manga series that I have been reading through. I've talked about Yona of the Dawn in the past. I really enjoy Yona of the Dawn. It is a shoujo, or a female-oriented fantasy manga. And it's part coming of age story, it's part adventure, kind of quest story, and then part romance as well. So I really enjoy it. I loved the anime, and I had been kind of like dragging my heels a little bit in reading the manga, but it recently finished. So I ordered a bunch of them, and I'm going to be reading through them. I think probably relatively quickly, but I have enjoyed that as well. All right, and the last book that I have to talk about, I saved this one for last. This wasn't the last book that I read in February, but it is the one that I saved to talk about last because I have a lot of thoughts about it. So this was Mythago Wood, which was a winner, I think, of the World Fantasy Award back in the 80s, maybe. I'll double check and pop that up. But it is a classic work of fantasy, award-winning fantasy, that has been on my TBR for a long time. And the basic premise of this is that we have a relatively young man, I think he's in his 20s, he might be in his 30s, who returns home after fighting in the war to find that his brother is not quite the man that he left behind. His brother, he had a very complicated relationship with his father, and he returns home to find that his brother has kind of adopted some of the tendencies, some of the peculiarities of his father, and he is not sure why. And what he discovers as he talks to his brother a little bit more, as he's home for a little bit longer, is that his brother has been venturing into the wood behind their home. And in this wood, there seems to be some sort of magical force. And so his brother kind of explains that their dad had the ability to go into the forest and have mythological beings from within his own mind, his own perception of mythological beings would come to life in the forest. And so the forest essentially can draw on your interpretation of myth and create those mythical figures from a combination of folklore, forest magic, and your idea of what these figures must be, the idea you have of them in your own mind. And so we get this brother's kind of journey into what this means, and he starts to interact with some of these mythagos. And so that is essentially the setup for the story. I will say at the beginning, I gave Mythago Wood 4 stars, and it's a very complex 4 stars. So I have opinions that are conflicting on this book. So first of all, in execution and writing style and atmosphere, this book is what I love about fantasy. So if you are someone like myself who grew up, if your introduction to fantasy and the way that you fell in love with fantasy was by reading The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, Arthurian retellings, that very earthy, mythology-based, forest-based fantasy, if that was a huge part of your introduction to fantasy or what you love about fantasy, this book is, I think, the ideal of what that fantasy is, just in terms of writing style and atmosphere. It is, when I was making videos in the past, atmospheric was something that people would say a lot, and then you'd get people commenting and saying, like, what does that mean? What is atmospheric? If you want an example of what I think of when I say that a fantasy novel is atmospheric, read Mythago Wood, because it is the best example. It makes you feel as though you're walking through an ancient forest, as if you're kind of closed in, as if you are going through everything that the character is going through. The writing style is dreamy. It makes you feel kind of lost and exposed and terrified and haunted. So from that perspective, excellent. I think I can understand why Robert Holdstock won the World Fantasy Award for this book, because he has done very interesting things with the concept of myth, what it means to mythologize something, how stories get remembered, why stories get remembered, how our interpretation of the past impacts what happens. There's a lot of really interesting and meaty stuff about Mythago Wood. The one challenge that I had with this story is that in a lot of classic fantasy, there aren't a lot of female characters. So that in itself is not a deal breaker for me. I just said I love Lord of the Rings. There's very little female presence on those pages, and what they do is not expanded upon very much in that immediate text. So there is a female character who plays a very central role in Mythago Wood, and the way that she exists and her purpose in the narrative and how she came to life and her being and why she was mythologized, I think could be challenging for someone who is a modern fantasy reader and who is used to seeing women have a lot of agency in fantasy stories. They're used to seeing a lot of strong, complex women in fantasy, because you don't really get that in Mythago Wood. This character is very strong. She is stronger, physically than the main character, but her purpose, the purpose that she serves within the story and what happens throughout the story, I think could be something that would be very challenging if you are someone who has come to appreciate women having more agency in the story. So that, I think, had I read it and that was my only qualm, I would say, you know what? It is a product of its time. It is a product of what mythology is, what gets remembered is shaped by the kind of society that we have lived in. And I don't think that anybody can be punished or really judged for creating a story that builds on that. What I can judge, and what I have judged, and what I did not like, is that any of the women who show up in this book, when they're described favorably, they're described favorably in very childlike terms. So a lot of there are lines in the book that say directly that the main female character has a prepubescent beauty and that she has an untouched body. And it's all very icky for me personally. I did not like it. It was, these things can exist and you can have a story that follows, a tragic young female character. You can have a story that is a reflection of the fact that much of our popular culture has been derived from myths and stories about men, and the part that women play in those stories can not really line up with our idea of what a modern woman should do or does do or contributes. But I don't think that anybody can really be expected to read a story where the main male character is attracted to his female counterpart because she looks like she's prepubescent. It was personally a big no for me. It took off the whole star. I think that this could have been a favorite book of all time had that element not been there, and I really didn't like it. So I think I probably will read the next book because I liked the idea. I liked the concept. I liked what was being set up, and that part really did disappoint me because, like I said, I feel like this could have been a favorite of all time. And as I said, I still think there's a lot of value in this book. I think there's value in reading a lot of things and seeing why they were important, what part of them was important. And I think that we can read and appreciate something, even while recognizing that there are parts of it that don't line up with what we like or what we think is prudent or appropriate for a book. But that was a major issue that I had with Mythago Wood. And it really changed the way that I felt about the story. And, I can't help that. You can't help what about a story is going to hit you the right way, what's going to hit you the wrong way. So I think there's a lot of value here. I can understand why this would be a favorite book for a lot of people. It appealed in many ways to the very smallest, the oldest parts of my fantasy loving heart. Like the part of me that started reading fantasy, that fell in love with fantasy when I was 8, 9, 10 years old. Mythago Wood was kind of the grown-up answer to a lot of those questions and thoughts that I had. But it also made me uncomfortable in a lot of ways. So it could not, unfortunately, become an all-time favorite, but I did have a good time with the other elements of the book. So I saved that one for last because, like I said, it was kind of a complex book to talk about and discuss. But if you loved it, I can appreciate all of the reasons why you did. And your mileage on how much of that is even noticeable to you, how much you pick up on it varies from person to person. But it did become very obvious to me, and it was not an enjoyable element of the book. But now I've talked a lot, and I'm going to take a tiny break, and I will come back and add my TBR to the end of this video. I'm just going to go and let Pippin out because I can hear him whining. So I will be right back. Okay, I'm back. And this part I am actually legitimately going to make quick because that part was longer than I thought it was going to be because of course it is. I always talk too much. But I have a couple of carryovers from February that I will be reading in March. So I still have not finished Empire of the Dawn. I'm sorry. It still has nothing to do with the quality of the book. I just, as I said, was very busy and I did not get time to sit down with that big chunky book. But I am hopeful for March. March is a longer month. We are going to be a little less busy, I think. I hope. I at least have some vacation time so I can read during those days. But I am going to continue with Empire of the Dawn and hopefully finish in March. And then I have started Dungeon Crawler Carl. And I won't give any thoughts here because I am recording a reading vlog for Dungeon Crawler Carl. So that one has been started. The reading vlog has started and I will be releasing that hopefully soon, maybe sometime this week. On the TBR, so I have 4 other books that I have on my TBR, keeping it short to try to keep it manageable and not feel overwhelmed. But the first book is Sing Unburied Sing, which I put on hold at the library for the audiobook. So that one has just become available. So I am going to be listening to that on audio and I'm looking forward to it. The next book is book 3 in the Wings of Fire series. So The Hidden Kingdom. Equally excited to continue along on this journey. Juliet's looking forward to me reading it. There's lots of events that she's looking forward to me kind of coming across and being able to discuss. So I'm looking forward to that one. I'm going to be reading Men at Arms. Finally, after recording the video talking about how much I liked Guards, I thought I really should get back to that series. And I'm also doing the Read Your Bookshelf Challenge. And the March prompt for that is a book with a weapon on the cover, and there is a sword on the cover of Men at Arms, or at least the copy that I have. So that fits for the Read Your Bookshelf Challenge. And then the very last book that I'm going to read is a book that I picked up when I was just recently in the city for one of our swim meets, and that is Osamu Dazai's Entrance Exam. It is a light novel from the Bungo Stray Dogs manga series. Bungo Stray Dogs is an anime that I binge watched over I guess it's not a binge truly because it did take me a couple of months to get through it, but it feels like a binge for me because I don't have a lot of time to watch TV. So it felt like it went pretty quickly, especially for a show that has 5 seasons. So over the last couple of months, I have been watching that. And I will say, and this is relevant, I think, because it is a book themed anime and this is a book channel, but it is both highly recommendable and not. Not because if you're new to anime or you are kind of on the cusp of whether or not you like anime, Bungo Stray Dogs has all of the things that people usually find annoying about anime. There's a lot of really wacky, over-the-top interactions. There's a lot of monologuing. There's a lot of silliness. There's a lot of abrupt changes and decisions that might not always make sense. So if you're new to anime and you're like, maybe I should watch something that Sarah recommends, this is not the one that I would recommend. But if you are an anime fan and none of that bothers you, I think that Bungo Stray Dogs is so fun. It is essentially the setup of the world is you follow a detective agency. And so the 2 kind of main factions in the show are this detective agency and then the mafia of the city that they live in. And every character in the anime is based on an author. So in season 1, those are mostly Japanese authors. And the main characters are all based off Japanese authors because they live in Japan. So if you are familiar with those authors, you will find that their abilities, so many of them have an ability, which is basically like a magical power, and those abilities are based off of those authors' main works. So they're often named after novels, short stories, characters within their novels. And so when I watched season 1, I thought it was really cool, but because I'm not as well read in Japanese literature as I would like to be, a lot of the references didn't totally land for me. But when we got to season 2, and there were some characters who were introduced who were American characters or European characters, and then they were books that I had read, books that I knew about, books whose themes I was familiar with, then I was like, oh, these powers are actually really cool. And the Japanese ones are very cool as well. I'm not saying that, American or European authors are cooler. I'm just saying that I had a frame of reference that I did not have in season 1 because I don't know as much about Japanese literature. But it made me want to go and read some of the books by the authors these characters are based on. Anyway, I think it's super fun. And this is the first of the light novels, which I'm very interested in reading. So if you are already an anime fan and you want to read anime that is book adjacent, I think that this is really cool. I really love it. I have been very obsessed. I have watched it all. And as I said, I'm going to now read all the light novels. So I'm looking forward to that. That's my last book on my March TBR. This video is very long. I hope you watched at least part of it. Thank you for being here. And I will see you with another, hopefully shorter, video soon. Bye.